I'm Donna Huffman, and I'm bringing the knitting class to you from the McDowell County Public Library today. And we'll start out with different sizes of needles. All needles are not great for each project, so you have to have different size needles as well as different size yarns to go with each individual needle. We have the circular needles and the straight needles. The circular needles you would use for a project like a hat, or maybe even if you were knitting a sweater. And then as you go to decreasing stitches with your circular needle, you may need to make it smaller where you would use the double pointed needles. And there are different sizes of double pointed needles to match the size of the circular needle. These are size 13 straight needles, and they would be used for the bulky yarn, kind of like this. This is the more bulky yarn. And you can find at Walmart these needles and the yarn. The yarn has, on the back of it, you can see what size yarn it is. This is a light, and it says 3. And then it tells what size needles to use. You would most likely use a 5 size needle with this yarn. And then if you have a pattern, you would go by the pattern. It would tell you what kind of yarn. A lot of times it will give you the name of the yarn that they use for the picture, you know, the pattern that they've got in the picture. This is cotton yarn, and you would use it for something like a dishcloth or a face cloth, and possibly baby items. And this is a scrubby yarn that you could use for a dishcloth. And these are some other sizes of yarn. I've got a project here that I'm doing with the rib stitch. The rib stitch, you go 2 knit and 2 purl. And this I've got started. This is the bulky yarn on the size 11 needles. And I also made this. It's the same pattern on the size 11 needles, and I wanted to show you the difference in this. It's more loose. It's a more loose stitch. This is a size medium yarn on the size 11 needles. So you can see the difference that the yarn makes on the needles, because since this is a more bulky yarn, this is like a tighter stitch on the bigger needles, and you probably couldn't use it really good on a smaller needle. And this is a double-sided scarf. It has the purl stitch, and it's like a rib stitch, but to make it double-sided, instead of doing the purl knit like we did in this project, you would do, when you get to the knit stitch, instead of going in the stitch right under the needle, you would go to the stitch below the needle, below the first stitch, the second stitch there, and it makes like a reversible stitch.
So pretty.
Okay, so that's just a little bit about the different yarns and the needles. We do have different sizes here. These are a 10, and these are 6, and these are 8. No, those are 9s. So you can see the difference in the sizes of needles. And we thank you all for coming and hope you have a good afternoon.